What is up? Welcome to Open Minded. I am Pete.
I'm Zach.
That's what I was waiting for. And today we're going to talk about a question that I think everyone asks themselves at some point in their life. What is time?
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime.
Like, the interesting thing is the houses you see around you are all solar houses.
21st Century Fox has been holding talks to sell most of the company to Walt Disney.
Oh, wait, what
I
time
love
is
this
it?
question.
What time is it? Oh.
What time is it?
No, what is time? Because time is a weird thing. It's funny because technically we're all traveling forward in time, 1 minute at a time, 1 second at a time.
But is time real?
I don't know.
I think it kind of isn't. It's just a thing we use to describe our consciousness
Maybe.
thinking forward like that, you know? But is it a real thing? Like, are things actually moving? Or are we just...
Perceiving it that way.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about, I have memories of the past, even though sometimes they're very faint and I don't remember much. But I have memories of the past. I have, like, memories of experiencing my life up until this point. But I don't have memories of the future because it has yet to happen. But I don't know.
But then there's weird things. Like, I also think that the brain messes up sometimes, and that could be like deja vu, but then there's those weird like dreams that I'll have sometimes of things that haven't happened yet, and then 2 weeks later or some shit it happens, and I'm like, wait a minute, I just dreamt about this like 2 weeks ago. This is so weird.
That is weird. That happens to me sometimes, and I do get deja vu. I actually got deja vu really bad the other day, and it used to freak me out a lot, but I read a study that said that what deja vu actually is our brain is moving faster than, like,
Then our mind comprehends.
Yes, exactly. Like, we experience...
Like, we only take a certain frames per second, but it's shooting them out like way faster than we could think,
Yeah, exactly. So you might be experiencing something, but then your brain registers it so faster than your conscious can comprehend it, that it seems like when you're experiencing it, your brain is telling you that you were already there at some point. But it's such a weird feeling. Like, I almost get vertigo when it happens because I get dizzy. I'm like, whoa.
It's like, whoa, wait a minute. You turn into
in
like
the Matrix.
You turn into like the fucking 80s fucking people in California smoking. Whoa. Like,
Or the 2018's people in California smoking.
whoa. But what I mean by like time isn't real, like if you're watching a DVD, like it looks like time's going forward, but you turn it off and you take the DVD out, and it's this solid crystal fucking thing that time isn't really happening to it. It's not like it's playing constantly or moving or anything, and that's what I think. Kind of like where we are. Time is a structured crystal, maybe, I don't know, like a three-dimensional kind of like sphere almost or something like that. And we're like these beams of like light, or like a wormhole of like consciousness just weaving its way through it. But it's not like we're moving. It's just like maybe light is going through it.
Kind of like Donnie
DVD.
Darko.
Yeah, like how that works. Like it makes that
It was
weird
a
fucking
stream. It was like a weird like worm.
and that's going through a solid crystal. That's the way I imagine it. And like it, how like you could see layers in like the ground when like an earthquake happens and you see all the different colors.
Yeah.
That's like what the crystal would look like. I mean, it would be one color in the center, and then like everything's like changing colors through.
And that's
I don't know,
time. Through
slices.
time.
The plank fucking thickness like that.
The problem I have with that, it makes sense. Like, it wouldn't be a three-dimensional like crystal; it would be a four-dimensional crystal because we can't perceive it, because it's a higher dimension than what we can perceive. We're the ones traveling through that crystal. If this is how it is, but when you take a DVD out and you stop the DVD, it's a crystal, but it's also that DVD itself is traveling through time with us because it will slowly deteriorate. And
Yeah, but that's just an example, you know?
I'm
Like,
getting too deep into it. Well,
trying to think of another way to put it, or another thing.
no, I like that DVD comparison because so there as of
But
like
also, that's what I mean. Like, it's our versus time. Like, if you had a time machine, you could safely go into the future and the past and not change anything. I don't know if you'll die or anything like that. Something like that could happen. But as far as going with a time machine, past and future, you could safely know that you're not changing anything, that the data that's on that crystal, you know, because you just say, if you went in the past, that means that if you're watching a DVD from front to back, you existed in time before you were ever born. And your existence in time, it made a butterfly effect that even made you be possible to be born. And that, like, if you go back in time and you can change something, you fucked up. You didn't get into a time machine. You got into like a parallel verse machine. You know,
yeah. I mean, well, so
somebody
that's
built it wrong and flipped the switch wrong or something. Added an extra zero and there should have been a one.
well, that's one theory of time. So, like, from my understanding, I pulled this up. There's 3 theories of time travel: the fixed timeline, which is pretty much what you explained. Even when parties travel back in time, the future or the future they left cannot be changed. All events remain as fixed points in time. The actions of the traveler in the past have already become part of history. So
Yes.
that's pretty much what you were explaining. And I think good movies that
They
kind
do
of,
that.
I mean, yeah, movies take
they're good.
movies
Like,
take snips
12
of all
Monkeys.
3 of these. Yeah, 12 Monkeys is a great example.
Yeah.
Another good example is Predestination, which blew me away.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
getting goosebumps just thinking about that movie. And then what you were talking about, the new Netflix series Dark, and you said
Dark.
that
Yeah.
it falls into that fixed timeline theory. I like that theory because I don't know. I feel like it makes the most sense.
It makes sense by the way we define things. Like, universe encompasses everything. There's never a parallel universe or another universe or anything outside the universe. Because by the way we define universe, anything that exists another universe, well, that means that it's now inside our universe, you know? Now we have 2 universes. But it's not universes.
Means
Now you're making a multiverse, so you have to just call it a verse. You have this verse, this verse, this verse, this verse.
So that's like right here, you can see that that's another theory. The multiverse theory versus the fixed time theory is the concept.
Well, I think they all in the same thing.
Well, no, I mean,
Each verse
listen
has
to
its
all
own
of them
crystal, and it all exists within its own crystal, and then
I
there's
don't know.
multiverse for that crystal, and just
It's
go
way
keep going.
too complex for
Fractal.
our tiny little minds to understand. So
I don't know. I think it's pretty easy, but to really imagine the grand scale of it, like, we can imagine the outcome and the actual, like, it equals, and then we can see what it equals, and we can imagine that. But, like, really doing all the math and putting, like, at the same time, like, putting it all in our head, we don't have enough, like, atoms in our brain to even have as many
comprehend it.
connections to think about that shit.
So the multiverse theory is the concept that in an infinite number of parallel verses, traveling into the past causes a new divergent timeline from the first. So, like you said, if somebody
parallel verse machine.
made a verse machine instead of a time machine, if you traveled back in time, then you really wouldn't be traveling back in time in that verse. You'd be traveling to a specific point in time in a parallel verse where all events up to that point possibly happened exactly the same, and you traveling to that verse will now change the course of time in that verse. I think that's a pretty cool theory too, and I think that both the fixed timeline and the multiverse theory could definitely coincide with each other. They could both be true, because if each verse has their own fixed timeline, then then in your verse that we're actually living in right now, if you were to get into a time machine and leave and travel to another verse, then in that verse it's set in time, it's already set in stone that you will disappear at a certain point in your life, and then you'll
not
just
even be in the universe.
yeah,
or
you'll
that
just be
verse.
missing. You'll just be missing for the rest of eternity, unless at some point you come back to that verse. Which who's to know that you're coming back to that same verse? You could be traveling to another verse.
Yeah. I don't like verse machines. I like time machines.
There's a really funny a YouTube video. Oh man, I'm gonna look it up. I forgot what it's called.
But like, isn't there like shows about that where they get into a machine and like almost like Stargate? It's not Stargate though. It's like a show like that. It was on like the Sci-Fi Channel where they get into it and they accidentally go into different, they were saying like universes. They probably even said like dimensions, which that makes me so angry when people say like he's from another dimension. Like, no, he's three-dimensional. Like, he's a three-dimensional creature. He didn't come from another dimension. But like another verse, and like they keep like it never brought them back. Like they had to keep trying to find a verse that was most similar to the one they left because they can never go back to one they already came to or whatever or from. And that made me like pretty scared. Like that would be a scary situation, you know?
Yeah, because who knows what that other verse...
Yeah, you could go to a verse where right now it's being bombarded by fucking asteroids, you know?
Yeah, and you
And
can
you-
never
like,
come
you're-
back
oh,
to your
shit.
original verse. And yeah, also, even if you travel from one verse to another verse and they're almost identical, like the situations up to that point are identical, let's say, it would still kind of make me feel bad because all the people that I love and know in this verse will all just think that I died or disappeared, and they would be like grieving for me because I just disappeared one day and I never said goodbye or anything. But then I would have a whole new interaction with people that I love in another verse, and possibly myself.
Yeah, imagine that. Imagine you go to a verse where you just didn't get into a time machine and it's like nothing ever happened. So you go there and it's just you and him, or you, and you're just talking about, oh my god.
This is so
imagine the shenanigans you could pull off with like that.
I imagine me holding hands and skipping through a field of sunflowers in slow motion.
Yeah, that'd be funny. And like just people are watching and they're like, what the hell?
Oh, they must be twins. But really, we're the
Really?
same person. So this YouTube video is called The 1 Minute Time Machine, and it is so hilarious. And I don't want to give a oh wow. I just headbutted my microphone. I don't want to give away the ending, but it perfectly explains and visually shows what would happen if you thought you had a time machine, but it was actually a verse machine.
Really?
Yeah,
It talks about that? That's crazy.
Yep. It's hilarious, and let's see, it is
Bronson.
5 minutes and 40 seconds long. I've got it pulled up right here, 1 minute time machine. So I definitely suggest you guys watch it. Maybe we could talk about it on a later episode because it's a perfect like representation of what a multiverse machine would look like. So the last theory of time that I have up here is called the dynamic timeline, and that is what, like Back to the Future.
Yeah, you're changing everything.
And the butterfly effect.
That's almost as scary as like being trapped going into different verses constantly.
I think
That
that's scary
scares me.
because if you do one tiny thing wrong, you could not exist. And
Exactly.
this is the perfect example. If you travel back in time and kill your grandfather, you also prevent your own birth and your eventual trip back in time. Like
That's
what?
the kind of one where physicists or any kind of like science show, they always try to talk about that one the most.
Yeah.
And that's the one I feel like they should be talking the least about. I mean, like, the whole thing is a paradox. So, like if you kill your grandpa, how are you ever born to go back in time to kill your grandpa? Like, so that one, I feel like that one's just strictly science fiction kind of. It's good for making movies like the fucking Back to the Future. But, like, if you're going to talk serious and, like, how we define things and just raw, I don't know, natural knowledge
Yeah.
of the way the universe works. Like,
It
try
just
and do
seems
something
more
you were never
plausible.
going to do. You can't change the future. You can't change the past.
Yeah, because you were never born.
Well, you were always going to do everything that you were going to do.
Yeah. The
All
fixed
atoms are
timeline
just
just
following the path of least resistance since the Big Bang.
Yeah, that's why I sit on the floor instead of the couch sometimes, because the floor is closer to me than the couch. It's the path of least resistance. Yeah, the fixed timeline just seems more plausible, and the multiverse, and like I said, both of those could,
Work together.
yeah, they could coexist.
Yeah, one does not make the other one not be able to happen.
You know, it's funny because I think in Back to the Future 2, they explore the multiverse theory, whereas in the first one, they only look at the dynamic timeline theory. Because in the first one, he goes back in time, he prevents his parents from meeting, and he starts to disappear, and his brother and sister are disappearing like they never existed. But then in Back to the Future 2, when he goes to the past again, and Biff finds the almanac, and then he comes back to the future, or back to his present time, then he meets up with Doc Brown, and he draws that alternate timeline type thing where it because Biff did this, we jumped to an alternate timeline, and now we have to go back to the past again.
But also,
You know what I mean?
that might not be a dynamic timeline because those could be just different verses. He could have jumped into a verse where, in that verse, a person who didn't exist comes in and does things that didn't happen from the one that he came from, obviously, because he comes from a different timeline. So maybe he just jumped into
A verse.
a different verse and then maybe even goes to the future of that verse,
Yeah, I feel like that makes more sense. You know, it's another good movie that and I didn't think this would be good. I've never really been a fan of Paul Walker, and I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate from that.
What was it, Timeline or something like
It was
that?
Timeline.
Yeah.
That was one of his best movies, I think, because that movie, it had Gerard Butler in it. It had Paul Walker. I don't know who else was in there, but it was a good movie because I think the main reason it was good is because it stuck to that fixed timeline.
Yeah.
Theory.
The things that they did made the things happen to where they came from.
Like in the beginning of the film, they find a
with the missing ear.
Yeah, a person, a mummy or a corpse,
statue or something.
Yeah,
like
it was a statue with a missing ear, and then later on in the film, one of the characters loses his ear and realizes that was him, and he was the one who discovered it, like for the first time in history, in his time, and it makes him happy. So I don't know. It's man, I'm getting goosebumps again.
Yeah. So that's at least what I think. I think time is a crystal, solid, doesn't change. But there are other ones that are similar, or even some that are crazy different, unrecognizable. But they all exist in a multiverse of different, like, verse crystals. And there's, all of them. And we're like these little conscious beams of light kind of going through it. Kind of the way a DVD works.
Yeah, I
It's
think
basically what we are. We're conscious things utilizing a crystal DVD. I don't know.
So if we are a DVD, then who's watching us?